Hello everyone, how are you? Today we'll be drawing this bird together with grease pencil using geometric shapes, so you can do it even with a mouse and with no drawing skills. At the end of this video, I will walk you through real quick on how to make other types of animals. You could even choose another design to make instead, just make sure it's an easy one with mostly simple geometric shapes. You can find simple concepts to use as a reference on Pinterest or free vectors on Freepik to get inspired. Remember, you can buy the blend file with all these drawings to support the channel. If you like a full video on how I made all of this, let me know in the comments. Okay, let's begin. Let's click outside the splash screen, delete the default cube and the light. I'm gonna set my camera before drawing. Make sure you are in frame 1 and add a new blank grease pencil object. With the grease pencil object selected, let's go to draw mode. I'm gonna disable use lights. Let's rename the layer. Go to the material tab, rename it. We're gonna start with the face. Enable a stroke if you want your drawing to have a border and choose the stroke color. I already know which colors I'm gonna use, but feel free to pick the ones you like to come up with something different than me if you want to. Take the alpha to 1, let's choose our fill color. Enable fill. I usually choose origin as my stroke placement and view as my drawing plane. I will draw in camera view mode. I will use the circle tool to make the face. I'm gonna set my strength value at 1. I'll disable the pen pressure because I'm using a graphic tablet and I don't want my strength to change. Let's make the face. To have an idea of the size and placement of my shapes, you can look at the right side of the status bar while I draw. If you want a perfect circle, press Shift. If you're drawing another type of animal, make the shape you like. You can even use the curve or the arc tool to make this type of shape without using the draw tool, but then you'd need a fill material and use the fill tool to paint inside. Now the ears. I'm gonna use this default material to create a pink one for the inside of the ears. And this predefined material has a different line type, which is dots. You could change it to line if you like. I wanted the ears to stay behind the face, so I made a new layer below the face layer. Using the same material as for the face, make 2 circles for the ears. Select the ear material to make the inside. Make a new fill material for the cheeks. And add another material for the nose. You could enable the Z axis to check where the center of the image is. add a new layer on top of everything so the nose, the cheeks, and all the face features remain on top of all the other shapes. Uncheck Use Lights. Select the material we made for the nose and make a circle. Using the cheeks material, make 2 circles. If you wanted to use a mirror modifier so you didn't have to draw the shapes that are on each side of the face, you'd need to put them in a different layer than the other elements. And choose that layer in the modifier to restrict the effect only to those items. Now we need a new stroke material to draw the details. I'm gonna use the Draw tool with the pencil brush. Let's make a triangle for the nose. If you don't want to use the Draw tool because you are using a mouse and you don't have a steady hand, you could use the line or the polyline tool and then paint inside with a fill material with the same color as the lines or with a different one. We could increase the smooth value in the advanced settings. Draw the hair. Instead of the Draw tool, you could use the Curve tool. Before confirming, you can extrude the end point of the curve and move the manipulators to get the shape you want. Once you finish the stroke, you can always perfect the shape in Sculpt or Edit mode. And add a lighter material for the hair's shading. Enable Draw Strokes on Back to draw the strokes behind the dark hair. Remember to save your file. We could polish the strokes a bit using the Smooth tool in a Sculpt mode. Let's fix this using the Thickness tool. And lock the other materials just to be safe. We could use the Grab tool to tweak the ear's shape a bit. You could thicken the face in some areas so it doesn't look so perfect. Lock the other layers. For the eyes, I added a new Wish Pencil object, but you could draw them in the same object we already have too. I'm gonna use this material we already used for the hair to keep the color palette limit. Sometimes using fewer colors makes your project look better than using a different color for each element. If you don't want to use the draw tool, you could use a fill material and the circle tool. Back to my project. You could draw the other eye, but instead I will use a mirror modifier. For the highlights, I added a new Wish Pencil object, but you could make it on the same one we already have. I made a new white stroke material. And just drew 2 dots. If you don't want to use the draw tool, you could use the circle tool as well. Then I added a noise modifier with a really low value to make the highlights twinkle a bit. I'm not gonna show you today how I animated the eyes, but I already have a tutorial on how to do it. You can watch it later, I'll leave the link in the description. Go to Material Preview mode, change the color management to standard, and let's enable still lights, and now we can see there's a layer where I forgot to disable use lights. I think if we replace the face stroke material with the hair stroke color, the color palette will look a bit more cohesive. To finish up, I decided to turn the solid materials into gradient ones so they didn't look so flat. As you can see, my first color is the one I had chosen for the material before turning it into a gradient one. I'm gonna use black so it's easier to see the gradient. Let's make it into a radial gradient material. If your object has a different shape or size, you might need to tweak the settings for the gradient material. Changing the blending mode is useful to see where the center of the gradient is. Remember, you can't see the gradient materials in solid mode. After trying several settings out, these are my final settings for the face gradient material. Now let's turn the cheek material into a gradient 1. I'm gonna show you my final colors and settings for the cheek material. Let's also turn the ear material into a gradient 1. These are my final settings for this material and the final colors. And make a gradient material for the nose as well. And these are my final colors and settings for the nose material. To complete this bear, I changed the color for the shading stroke material. And then I modified the hair in a sculpt mode. For rendering with pencil, remember to enable Combine and set passes. Okay, now some tips to make other types of shapes. For the panda's face, I used the circle tool with a stroke and fill material, just like for the bear. For the eyes, I started with a circle and then I used the push tool in a sculpt mode. If you don't want to use the draw tool for the mouth, you can use the arc tool, extrude to get the other side of the mouth, and then use the line tool. For the eyeballs, I used a stroke and fill material. For the cat, I also used the circle tool, and then I made the ears using the arc tool and a stroke material. Then, using the fill tool and fill material, I painted. To make the big darker spot, I used a mask layer and the draw tool. I moved some points in edit mode so the ears were a bit less pointy. To get a triangle for the nose, I started with a square using the box tool and then I deleted some points and rotate the triangle. I made the whiskers using the draw tool, but you could use the arc tool as well, and using the thickness tool I made the ends thinner. And for the hairs sticking out of the ears I used the draw tool and the push tool. For the frog, I also started with the circle tool and then I modified the shape using the push tool. To get the outline, I applied the mirror modifier and merged the layers. Then I duplicated the circles and moved them to a new layer and placed that layer below the face. I assigned a dark green material and I scaled the strokes. I added a mask layer to paint this yellow part, and using the same color as the outline, I made a stroke material for this green line. And lastly, I made this raccoon using the arc tool for the face, and then I filled it with the fill tool. I modified the shape using the push tool so it didn't look so geometric. And in a new mask layer I added the dark part, but you could also use the curve and the arc tool to make it, instead of the draw tool. In the same mask layer, I added this white shape and copied and rotated 180 degrees to make the other one. After making the nose with the draw tool, I modified the dark part a bit more using the push tool. Remember, you can buy the blend file to support the channel and you'll get all the animals I showed you today, one in each scene. If you like more videos like this one, where we draw something simple together, let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!